Shall we talk about 2020?
Let's do it.
Okay.
That's good.
As many of you already know, we left LA at the end of 2019 to start an extended road trip around the country. In over 8 months, we drove from the West Coast to the East Coast and back to the West, covering a total of 19 states and more than 20,000 miles in distance.
We started in San Diego, California, the finest city in the US, where I lived for 2 years. It's always good to be back for a getaway.
Then, we headed to Joshua Tree National Park, where we had our first boondocking experience to camp right by the big boulders.
Our next destination is Death Valley National Park. On the way there, we had a brief reunion and send-off party with some of our family and friends.
I wish we'd stayed in Death Valley longer because there's so much to explore. Sitting by the campfire under the stars was one of our most unforgettable experiences.
Next, we made a brief stop in Vegas to visit our friends. From there, we continue on to one of our favorite places, Sedona in Arizona, which is known for the majestic red rock scenery and the powerful vortex energy.
From Sedona, we drove south to Tucson, where we camped right outside the Saguaro National Park.
Then we kept driving east and visited 2 national parks in New Mexico. One is White Sands, and the other is Carlsbad Caverns.
White Sands used to be a national monument located near a U.S. missile range and finally was made a national park in late 2019. The park encompasses miles and miles of pure white sand dunes, and you can easily get lost in it.
Carlsbad Caverns is known for its show caves, including a large limestone chamber named as the Big Room, which is the largest in North America.
Leaving New Mexico, we drove down to the Big Bend National Park in South Texas. It was one of our longest towing days.
Well, Texas is a big state. When we drove from Big Bend to Austin, it took another 2 back-to-back driving days.
In Austin, we finally had a relatively long and relaxing stay, exploring the city, trying local barbecue, and catching up with friends.
From Houston to New Orleans, we had our first camping experience in a Walmart parking lot. It's so convenient and free.
New Orleans definitely has its unique culture, very different from most of the other places we visited. We even caught a bit of Mardi Gras and saw a parade.
From there, we went straight to the Sunshine State, Florida. It's one of our top states to visit. Our first destination was Destin, a nice beach city in the Panhandle area by the Gulf of Mexico.
Then we made 2 quick stops in Tallahassee, the capital city of Florida, and Gainesville, the college town, before we arrived in Naples in South Florida, which is a perfect place for retirement.
After Naples, we continued on to the Florida Keys. Key West is definitely one of our highlights during this trip. We were so lucky to get a campsite right by the Atlantic Ocean. Having stone crabs and a key lime pie with this gorgeous view, we are in a true paradise.
From Key West to Miami, we visited the Everglades National Park to see the famous swamp and alligators.
Personally, I'm very impressed with the art scene in Miami. Hopefully, we can go back there to see more. Oh, the Cuban food is the best.
Up next is my all-time favorite, Disney World. Our campground was at Fort Wilderness, which is part of the Disney World and only a boat ride away to the Magic Kingdom.
We drove up north and stayed at a farm called Eden Gardens near Jacksonville. There, DK got to learn how to grow strawberries and hydroponics from our lovely host.
Next, we continued going up north to Savannah, Georgia, to get a taste of the southern charm.
By the time we reached Hilton Head, South Carolina, most states began to shut down, making it difficult for RV travel or camping. So we decided to hunker down, and we were so fortunate to find an Airbnb cabin in the woods near Asheville, North Carolina, which is also one of my favorite places.
We parked our Airstream next to the cabin and stayed in Asheville for about 6 weeks. During our stay, we got to explore the Blue Ridge Mountains numerous times through hiking and driving.
When things started to reopen, we went back to our Airstream, heading back west this time.
We spent a few days in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the most visited national park in the US. Even during the pandemic, it remained pretty busy.
Then we continue on to Nashville, Tennessee, a very special place in my heart. It's my starting point in the US, where I spent 3 years in law school. It definitely feels like coming home.
Yes, I enjoyed visiting Nashville as well, especially seeing those places Pong used to live. Although most museums and attractions were still closed at the time, I did get a general feel about this music city.
After Tennessee, we checked out 2 state parks in Missouri, one called the Hawn State Park, about an hour south of St. Louis, and the other is the Bennett Springs State Park, where you can go fly fishing almost year-round. That's really cool.
We quickly passed through Kansas with a very brief stop in Kansas City and Topeka, the state capital. It was scorching hot and super quiet everywhere we went.
I have to say the drive from Kansas to Colorado is probably the most boring one, with only flat, barren fields by the roadside.
Then we were greeted by the beauty of Golden, Colorado, a charming mining town just 30 minutes west of Denver. Our campsite was right by a rocky creek that runs through the town. Here you can go tubing, or take a quick dip in the snowmelt water, take a bike ride, or just walk by the creek.
From Golden, we drove up north to the famous Rocky Mountain State Park. Only an hour north of Boulder. It's a growing city with more and more technology companies, also one of our favorites.
On the way to Colorado Springs, we boondocked at the Colorado Campground. There's no phone signal, but only pine trees and birds around us, reminding me so much of my childhood camping experiences.
In Colorado Springs, we visited the Garden of the Gods and had the most scary drive up to the Pikes Peak.
Then we continued south to visit the Great Sand Dunes National Park. We were lucky to find a campsite within the park, but I also had my first towing accident there. Yikes.
It wasn't so bad, and we kind of made friends with the park rangers.
Continuing on, we arrived in Breckenridge at the base of the Rocky Mountains 10-mile range.
Compared to other ski towns like Aspen and Vail, Breckenridge feels less commercial and touristy, more open and accessible. Wherever you go, the backdrop of the Breckenridge Mountains is just magnificent.
Also, the RV resort we stayed at near Breckenridge is one of the best, with a very manicured landscape combined with so much natural beauty.
After Breckenridge, we kept driving west, and the scenery quickly changed from snow mountains to Grand Canyons. We camped by the Colorado River in Glenwood Springs, another charming town. We used it as our base to visit the famous Maroon Bells.
Maroon Bells includes 2 peaks of the Elk Mountains, both over 14,000 feet. The best season for photography is probably autumn when trees change colors.
Continuing west, we spent a couple of days in Colorado's Grand Mesa area, which is home to over 300 fish lakes at a high altitude of over 10,000 feet. There are over 3,000 miles of trails in the area with very rugged beauty.
After that, our last stop in Colorado was in Fruita, where we visited the Colorado Monument. Again, no words can describe the natural beauty, and even photos don't do it justice. You just have to be there and see it for yourself.
Our original plan was to tour most national parks in Utah, known as the Mighty Five. Because of the hot weather and some other reasons, we decided to skip this part and only pass by Salt Lake City to visit DK's B-School friend. From Utah, we drove north to Idaho. On the way to Boise, we passed Twin Falls.
Boise is a very special place to me. I lived here for over 6 months in 2013 and always wanted to take Peng here and show her around.
It's a very peaceful and a livable city. We enjoyed walking around the Boise River Greenbelt.
From Boise to Bend, Oregon, it's another long towing experience. Before this visit, I had heard a lot about Bend, a high desert city in Oregon, with tons of outdoor options from biking to skiing.
Yes, it's perfect for people who are athletic and outdoorsy, and it's much drier than Portland.
Speaking of Portland, we've stayed here since early August. It's the ending point of our road trip in 2020.
Well, we didn't quite end our Airstream travel here. We did a 10-day camping trip along the Oregon coast, remember?
Yeah, I love the Oregon coast, and in a way, even more than the California coast. It's much less crowded, providing great solitude to quiet my noisy mind.
You can meditate alongside those giant silent rocks.
So far, we've really enjoyed our stay in Portland. It's funny that we used to joke about moving here and becoming Portlandians. Now here we are.
Portland is a much smaller and a more livable city compared to big metro areas like LA. It has many cute walkable neighborhoods with enough urban amenities like good restaurants and parks. It also offers easy access to nature. We used to hike at the Forest Park almost every day, which is only 7 to 8 minutes of drive from where we live.
People ask us how long we plan to stay in Portland. The answer is, we just don't know yet. For now, we've decided to stay here for a very important reason, which is...
we are expecting another baby, and he will join us in January.
Can't believe Brian will be a bigger brother soon. Still feels a bit unreal.
Yeah, that was our 2020.
We made it. So what next in 2021?
To be continued.